Mike Tomlin said for this week, the Steelers have a put up or shut up week. We'll talk about that and the defense here with Arthur Moats, former Steelers himself, talking about what the Steelers need to do. I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you see this video on YouTube, hit the like button on this video if you enjoyed. Hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. As I said before, Arthur Moats, don't cross the Moats, a.k.a. The Body 52 on Twitter. He's back on the show. What's up, Moats?
Man, can't complain, man. You know, living it to the dream or living up to the fullest. Other than that, though, can't complain, man. And always good to see you, baby. How are you, though?
I am doing just fine. Also, before we start, I got to say a special happy birthday to my mom. I just want to say, Mom, if you watch and you listen, I love you. If you not watch and listen, I hope that you took the day off from work and you just minding your business, having a nice little drink and enjoying a sunny Wednesday morning out there. So happy birthday, Mom. I love you very much. But Moats,
there we go. Shout out to Mama Carter right there. Absolutely.
Indeed. Now, Moats, I gotta talk to you about this because Mike Tomlin came out and you know this wasn't a I think this was too bold of a statement, but he said this is a put up or shut up week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're getting ready to play the Saints. The Saints, not a good team. You saw how they played Monday Night Football. The Steelers coming out of the bye week. Daniel Valente pointed this out on Twitter. Go follow that guy. He's great at pulling out Steelers stats. He said the Steelers have won 5 straight games coming out of the bye week. It's going back or the last 5 years they've won the game coming out of the bye week. This seems like the perfectly lined up opportunity for the Steelers. You got the Saints coming out of a short week. They're coming to your house. You're coming out of a bye week. You got TJ Watt supposed to be coming back. You got Damontae Kazee coming back. This seems like the perfect chance for the Steelers to set the right tone. Is this reasonable for Steelers fans to finally have confidence about a game this week or this year?
No, 100% it is for a couple of reasons. When you're talking about the opponent, first off, the Saints are a struggling team. We saw that last night, we saw that on Monday night. And more importantly, they struggle at some of the key positions, offensive line being one of them. But number 2, at the quarterback position, they're trying to figure out who is their guy that they want to go with. They dress both of the guys in terms of Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston, but they're still undecided in terms of who they want to be that long-term answer for the rest of the season. But when you're talking about the Steelers element and why you should feel optimistic, well, number 1, they got an extra week to prepare, an extra week of preparation to just solely focus on the New Orleans Saints. They also had extra time to figure out some of the things that they were struggling with and ultimately how to get better at some of those things and ultimately maximize the areas that they've been doing well in. But then more importantly than that, I do feel like the health element is key. When you talk about TJ Watt, we understand that this is the highest paid defense, and he takes up a big chunk of that. Yeah. So when you don't have him out there, you are missing that caliber productivity, that caliber force multiplier as well. And for me, I just think that TJ coming back along with Damontae Kazee is going to open up some things for this team defensively. It's going to allow them to really be more of that aggressive attacking, take the ball away type of defense versus, hey, we're going to let you get yardage in between the 20s, but then when we get to the red zone, we're going to get really, really tough on you. We can go back to being that defense that we saw in week 1 that we loved and that we, kind of anticipated seeing for the large majority of this season versus the defense that we have been seeing of lately.
Right. And I think a big part of this, everyone's looking at it, is can they be, the defense that everyone was talking about? And there was some interesting insight into this because Moats, you're a defensive guy. You play defense for the Steelers. You play defense for the Bills. You built your career on that experience on that side of the ball. And there was legitimate reason to be excited about this defense. But, once TJ went out, people were still pushing the $100 million defense narrative. And like you said, with TJ taking up almost $25 million in cap space, it becomes a $75 million defense at that
Absolutely.
point. And it's like, it's at that point, then you're not, the highest paid defense. And that's not including games where Minkah Fitzpatrick missed, games where all three of your top corners missed. And that's not to say excuse for the Steelers, but there's been reasons
That's
why
context,
they've ranked.
though. That context matters.
Yes,
Absolutely.
it is. And yes, the Steelers rank towards the bottom of the league in a lot of defensive statistics right now. But I do think there's actual reason for there to be hope to say, hey, coming out of this break, coming out of this opportunity, the Steelers defense can play a lot better.
No, 100% they can. First off, when you're talking about some of the games that they didn't play their best in, these aren't issues where we're looking and we're saying, hey, we don't have the guys that can match up with these players. We're looking at it and saying more, hey, these are missed opportunities. Miami Dolphins game, we point out the multiple dropped interceptions. That's not we don't have guys that can get in position to make plays.
Right.
That's just simply guys not being consistent at doing things that we've already seen them do.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about that Eagles matchup, we haven't seen Minkah Fitzpatrick make plays on
miss a
50,
jump
50
ball.
balls.
Yeah.
Come on now. Like, we know what he's capable of. Even Akello Witherspoon in that particular context, we haven't seen him consistently give up those type of passes either. So when I think of that, it's very, legitimate when you're talking about why you should feel optimistic, because number one, the track record speaks for itself. But number two, when you're talking about these guys getting healthy, when you're talking about adding on a TJ Watt caliber player, this is the reigning defensive player of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the caliber of player that they have been missing. That's not somebody that you just casually replace and say next man up. That's not somebody that you casually replace and say, hey, the standard's the standard, because he is an outlier. But now that you're going to be getting that outlier back, that force multiplier back, now you will see this defense be a lot better, because if you're a corner, man, when you don't have TJ, you got to cover for 5, 6, sometimes 7 seconds. But when TJ is out there, well, now you're covering for 3, maybe 4 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you're not, quote unquote, an elite tier guy, TJ can be that guy that essentially helps you grade on the curve to take you from being good to an elite player. And that's the fact that, and that's the point that, we've been trying to make it in a sense, but without making it sound like you're seeking comfort, because you're not. But this is legitimate context, and he is that good of a player.
I think he is too, and we're going to get more into him and Kazee in a minute. Before we go to the next break, I still want to ask. I wanted to ask you this, Moats. The Steelers are 2-6, right? They haven't been 2-6 since 2013, but there was also a time when you were on the team where there was a rough stretch. 2016, you guys started out 2-0, but then there was a stretch after that where you guys went 2-5.
Yeah,
and you guys at one point were 4-5. You already had your bye week, and it was looking grim.
And people
Y'all lost.
Losing their mind.
Right. Everyone was saying fire everybody, get rid of everybody. But you guys rallied. You guys found a way to string together. I think it was 8 wins to get into the playoffs, and then you won 2 playoff games. What do you remember about what the team was like? And I know I know like not everyone from there is there anymore. Like Cam Hayward's still there,
right.
But still, like, this is a Mike Tomlin team. What do you remember about what the atmosphere was around the organization that kind of like led to that turnaround that you guys had?
Yeah, well, first off, man, when you're talking about the in-house element of it, it sucked, because Coach Tomlin did transition from being super understanding and wanting to communicate and hearing your side of your opinion to being really rigid, really, aggressive in his approach. And it was more so, if you didn't do it exactly the way that he wanted to the letter of the land, then he was going to ultimately fine you. Even as mundane as it may be, if I say, hey, at 3 p.m., I want your toes on the line, and it's 2:59 and your toe is in front of the line, and it's 3:01 and your toe is behind the line, he was going to fine you. He was going to take money out your pocket. And when you're talking about at the NFL level, that is something that can very easily get you to lose your team. But for us, we understood where his stance was, because we had realized that, hey, the privilege that he had given us in the sense of, hey, I'm going to be more understanding towards you. I'm going to allow you to be a little bit more loose in your preparation, a little bit more loose in terms of how we operate on the road, right? Curfews and stuff like that. Well, we had showed him that we weren't mature enough for that at that time. So his response to that was, I'm going to be super disciplined. I'm going to make this as military, style as possible, because that's what you guys need right now. And throughout that, even though we complained about it, even though we were pissed about it, and some of us were losing a good amount of money behind it, it eventually hit a point where we're looking up and we're like, man, even though we're mad, bro, we done knocked off 6 in a row. Man, even though we're mad, we just knocked off 8 in a row. Even though we're mad, we just went on the road in the postseason and won 2 games back to back. Like, this is just crazy. Like, that's the situation. So afterwards, we look back and we thought, it was one of the best things that could have happened to us, Coach Tomlin being the way that he was, and that ultimately helped us carry over into the 2017 season. And you remember how we started out that year,
Yep.
and outside of a Shazier injury, in a Jesse James catch, no catch, we thought that was our best year here. We thought that was our best team, offensively, defensively, and special teams. But it really started that year prior, coming off of that. I always think of the Miami Dolphins, Jay Ajayi, 200 yards on the ground. Yeah, that was like the rock bottom for us, so to speak. And then from there, we figured out, okay, well, we got to operate with more detail. And once we started to do that, man, just week in and week out, things started to fall into place. And it wasn't like we're blowing teams out. These were still close one-score games.
Right.
But we had that level of understanding that if we operate with this type of detail, there is not a team out there that can beat us. And it held true up until we lost to the eventual Super Bowl champions.
I want to get back to you about this because the idea of Mike Tomlin increasing his intensity and his rigidness with the players, I think there's just some natural questions about how he should apply that or when he should apply that and how he might be applying it this year, as well as other things that we'll get to in a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, before we do any of that, we got to talk to you guys about Simply Safe. Now, what is Simply Safe? Simply Safe is one of the best alarm companies out there in the company. It's here to help make your home safe at all times. They whenever you're out or whenever you're at home, you can feel safe about the safety of your home by getting Simply Safe, because they bring cutting edge technology that's powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back, so that you always know that your home is safe. What I can tell you is that if you ever contact Simply Safe staff for help, they're attentive, they pay attention to what you're asking about, and they do everything they can to help you find whatever you're looking for, figure it out whatever situation that you're in. I really love the way that Simply Safe's phone app makes it easy to get in contact with them, because it keeps you up to date with the safety of your home at all times, and it makes it easy to get answers whenever you have questions, thanks to the app and their support team. With 24/7 professional monitoring, Simply Safe's agents call you the moment that a threat is detected and dispatch police or first responders in case of an emergency, even if you're not at home or can't be reached. Simply Safe blankets your home in protection with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door. HD security cameras for inside and outside your home. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl. Save 20% on Simply Safe security on a security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month for free. Do that by visiting simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl, because there's no safe like Simply Safe. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Arthur Moats. All right, Moats, I thought you touched on some really interesting part of what helped you guys turn things around back in 2016, because you're right. I mean, you guys went from 4-5 to being a strong team in the playoffs, and you lose to the Patriots in their house, no Le'Veon Bell, and then next year, you're right, 2017 was a monster of a run, and I'd say the best team that we saw of the 2010s, outside of 2010 when they went to the Super Bowl. But I got to ask you about that rigidness. You brought up something that's real, I think is really important there. And I think one aspect of this is that, you brought up like, hey, you can't always do that, because if you always, if that's just who you are 24/7, eventually that gets stale, right? Because the players are just like, oh, well, that's just, it doesn't matter. That he's being rigid, because he's rigid every day. What is to make a difference? And I think, I'm not saying this like I know how you guys, how exactly you guys think, but just remembering how I've listened to players talk about, even Mean Joe Green. He said, there was one day when Chuck Noll, said something emphatically in a locker room, and he said, when I think that when the media called the Dolphins and the Raiders the two best teams in the NFL, and he said, we're the best team in the NFL, and he said that lit the team because Chuck never spoke like that. And I think I want to get your perspective. Is Mike Tomlin doing the right thing by not being this rigid guy all the time? Is he pushing the right buttons, or do you think that's a mistake in his coaching that's kind of allowed this situation to manifest to be 2-6?
No, so for me, man, I trust Coach Tomlin, and when you talk about his ability to go from the quote unquote players coach to this more rigid approach, or for name purposes, more of a Bill Belichick style approach. For him, he has to operate with who he is as a person. And his personality, the majority of the time, is the loving. I want to know more about you. I want to have this connection. I want to talk to the heart of Chris Carter, the heart of Arthur Moats, not number 55, not number whatever, and that's a difference. But when you talk about the pros and cons to that, the pro is, as players, we're going to respect him a lot more. We're going to feel that he respects us a lot more. But if a person isn't mature enough for that, they could take that for granted and ultimately use that in harm's way, in the sense of not preparing the same way, because they feel like, hey, since I know him, he's going to give me a little bit more leeway. He's going to give me a little bit more benefit of the doubt. Whereas other places where, a coach is super by the book and it has to be done that way, yeah, it might work. But at the same time, I've been places like that under coaches, and you lose the locker room when it's not resulting in wins. And you have to understand which team is like that, which players you can talk to like that, because it's not a thing where you could just blanket it all the way across. From my personal experiences, when I've seen them try to blanket it all the way across, you lose the team. Whereas with Coach Tomlin, some years it's going to be, I got to be this super rough authoritarian. But for us during that time, I do feel like it was a good enough mix of veterans who had our experiences in the league and youth guys, but our youthful players were very humble. They were really receptive of anything that we were going to tell them. So when we told them, hey, man, Coach Tomlin isn't being a jerk. He's doing what's needed. He's doing what's necessary. They understood that, and they received it in the right tone. And then from there, they were able to go ahead and flourish. With this particular unit, I don't personally know them on that same level because I haven't shared the locker room with the majority of these guys. So if Coach Tomlin feels to himself, if I take this super aggressive approach or super rigid approach, maybe they're not mentally strong enough just yet. Because when you look on this roster, offensively, who is the veteran? Where's your Marquise Pouncey? Where's your David DeCastro? Where's your Ramon Foster?
You don't got them.
Where's your Darius Hayward-Bay? Where's your Benjamin Roethlisberger? You don't have those guys. Where's your Antonio Brown? Not in the sense of the productivity, but in the sense of 8-9-year veteran wide receiver.
Right.
You don't have that. So you're lacking critical leadership. You're lacking critical moments when guys can look and say, hey, man, when you were in this situation a couple of years ago and y'all got out of it, what did y'all do? They don't have that person to turn to offensively. Defensively, they got some of those guys, a Cam Hayward, Tyson Alualu, a Cam Sutton, Minka to an extent, TJ to an extent, but you still are lacking those guys that have been here for 7-8 years and know the culture, know what it's like to go on a playoff run. When we're looking at this team right now, who are the players that have went on playoff runs in Pittsburgh?
Sutton, Cam Hayward. That's it.
Hayward, Boz.
I forgot about Boz.
A lot of that. So when you're talking about, for Coach Tomlin trying to figure out how to toe that line, it's very different this go around than when it was with us.
Right.
Because with us in 16, we had already won the division twice.
Yeah.
We had already been, in the postseason and experienced hosting a game, experienced being on the road, experienced winning a playoff game, losing one that was controversial. Like, we were at a different stage in our development. We were also a more mature team as well. And I think that that's the part with this particular unit that some of these growing pains, they just have to happen.
Yeah.
Some of these moments, even though we would love to have that quick fix, unfortunately, experience is sometimes the best teacher. And this is one of those moments that I do feel like, he's managing it the best way he can. But yeah, they got to go through this. You got to, face that rough patch before you can get back to the mountaintop. And that's where they're at right now.
I do agree. That is definitely where they're at. And I also think, like you talked about, experience being a big part of it. Also, talent is a big part of it. Just our guys good enough to be, because it don't matter, how locked in you are. Moats, I'm sure you've met guys, and I know guys that they're the most focused guys in the world. They're the most, they are detailed, but they're just not tall enough, or they're not fast enough.
Chris, I could tell you every position. I could coach it till the cows come home. I don't care what I do. I will never be able to do what a Myles Garrett could do. I can never do what a Mario Williams, because athletically, I don't have that gift. Even though I could tell you how to do it, coach it up, I'm not capable of that. You're absolutely right. The talent does matter. And when you look at this roster, there are certain positions where we're like, hey, there is a little bit of a talent gap here. Now, some of that was, not on the Steelers, whether you're talking retirements, injuries, and things like that, but on the flip side, some of the stuff has been on the Steelers. And that's the kind of give and take in this situation, where when we talk about who's at fault, you don't get to 2-6 overnight. You don't
Right.
get the 2-6 by one bad decision or by one, unlucky injury.
Happenstance.
Nah, it's multiple things.
Yeah.
We talk about the offensive line. It's multiple things. We
Mm-hmm.
talk about the pass rush. It's multiple things. We talk about the second. It's multiple things. But that is a part of it, and it's not going to be one quick fix to get you out of that hole either. And that's the concept that us as fans have to get, just a better understanding of. It's unfortunate, and it's the gift and the curse, because we're very fortunate here that we've won so much that we don't experience this a lot. But now that we are in it, we have to understand that, yeah, this is, a part of getting out of it. You have to still go through this phase.
Absolutely. I want to talk more specifically about the defense and what you see about them with the guys coming back. Mike Tomlin also talked about Damontae Kazee and the impact he'd have when he's back in the lineup. But don't go away, guys. We're talking more about that right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, got to talk to you guys about Blue Nile. Whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then handcraft her perfect engagement ring, and each ring is one of a kind. Looking for fine jewelry but having trouble choosing? Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7. They're available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings, so be sure to use that promo code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON, Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress free. Find your forever piece today by going to BlueNile.com. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Arthur Moats. We caught Moats sipping on some water and recovering there at the last second there on camera at the commercial break. Don't think we didn't see you, but it's all good. I got my AG1 over here that I'm sipping on.
There it is. Gotta hydrate, baby. Gotta hydrate.
Exactly. Got to stay hydrated. Got to stay healthy. But Moats, we heard a little bit, what we heard from Damontae Kazee on Monday. He said that he expects to be back and playing this weekend against the Saints. And Mike Tomlin also addressed it. Mike Tomlin's, when asked about it, said, when he's healthy, we're rolling out 3 safety sets. And Moats, you and I talked about this, I believe, a little bit during training camp and how big this could be for the defense. Not that all 3 safety formations work all the time. It's not like it's an obvious cure all in the NFL. But they invested to go get KZ. They paid Terrell Edmonds. They paid Minkah Fitzpatrick, and they have been able to use them as a trio. I really think this is a part of the defense that can really unlock a lot of things in coverage, in run support, in keeping the middle of the field control, and it kind of help everything else come together here. Am I overstating the value of having KZ healthy with a healthy Edmonds and with a healthy Minkah Fitzpatrick?
No, you're not. In fact, the beauty is this, man. When you talk about those 3 guys in particular, the thing that they have in common is this, man. All 3 are big athletes.
Yeah.
And why do you want big athletes, big guys that can play in space? Well, now, instead of having to play sub-package ball where you're in nickel and it's an Arthur Moats potentially having to take on a pulling guard, potentially having to set the edge, now it's a Minkah Fitzpatrick or a Terrell Edmonds or a Damontae Kazee. That changes a lot. When you're talking about how you're able to go from that formation with the 3 safeties, play base defense in the sense of run, but then if they try to disperse and give you a smaller package, and now you have to play pass coverage where you still have guys that can cover. Damontae Kazee led the league in interceptions a couple of years ago. He's more than capable. We know what Minkah Fitzpatrick is, and we've already talked about, or at least seen the improvements in terms of Edmonds' coverage this season. So with that, when you have those 3 guys, it just gives you a lot of flexibility to dictate to the offense instead of allowing them to dictate to you. And that's the thing that you love, but that's a big element that has been missing. They've tried to operate with Trey Norwood at times, but it hasn't been, to the level that they would like it. They rotated through, like I said, with Arthur Moats, Cam Sutton bumping those guys inside, but that's still a different element because those are smaller body types. A slot corner compared to a safety is just different. But when you're talking about having those bigger body guys in there, it just gives you so much more flexibility in terms of run support along with being able to cover. But you have to have those caliber guys. And when you talk about Damontae Kazee, he definitely fits that bill. Minkah definitely fits that bill. And Edmonds has shown that he's developed into a player that also fits that bill now. So, yeah, having those 3 guys together is going to be a huge asset.
I think it is a huge asset, but it makes me realize, a lot of people are like, well, what's going to be different about this Steelers defense? They were terrible in the first half of the season, but you're talking about not just the insert of Damontae Kazee, not just the return of TJ Watt, but also the addition of William Jackson III at corner. And not that William Jackson III by himself is going to fix everything wrong at that's gone wrong at the cornerback position, but you're infusing 3 NFL veterans who are good players. Two guys that were signed
high pedigree
free
guys too. High pedigree guys as well.
High pedigree guys. Damontae Kazee was sought out by the Steelers in free agency. William Jackson III received a pretty penny from the Washington Commanders to play corner out there. And again, the reason why they let him go is because I think they realized too late that they are in the wrong system to play him. He's a bump and run man press guy, not a back off zone guy. And then you add the defensive player of the year in TJ Watt and Moats. This to me is a recipe for the defense stepping up. I know there's a lot of people that are just like mad and frustrated, and it's natural. Steelers fans get frustrated when they're not. When you talked about it, with the expectations of fans, but they've also faced some of the top offenses in the NFL, whether it's the Dolphins, the Eagles, or the Bills, and the Bengals. They face. I mean, all what did I just say? 4 teams, maybe 5 teams.
That was 4, yeah.
That's 4 teams right there. They're among the best offenses in the league right now, and they were able to at least go toe to toe with 2 of them, with half of them. They beat the Bengals and almost beat the Dolphins. To me, and especially when you look at the teams coming up, like the Saints, like the Colts, like the Raiders, like the Panthers, I think there's some very winnable situations the Steelers could go into if the defense gets to the level, they stay healthy. That's the biggest thing in all this is they cannot lose TJ again. They can't lose Minkah Fitzpatrick. They can't lose Cam Hayward. There's certain guys that they cannot replace. But if they can stay healthy, they can bang with these teams. They can get their record back on track. I don't think it's crazy for people to have optimism about, especially the defensive side of the ball right now.
No, absolutely, man. Defensively, not only are you getting healthier, but like you talk about the talent coming back. William Jackson III, regardless of what anybody wants to have in terms of an opinion on him, he is a more proven corner than anybody that we currently have on our roster in terms of being a true outside corner, whether you're talking the size, whether you're talking the speed, the productivity. He is that. And when you watch him on tape, even this season with the Commanders, when healthy, this dude can still get it done. He is a bump and run man-to-man corner, like you said. Ball skills are there. Now, is he a perfect prospect? No. Is he a perfect player that's never going to get penalized, never going to get beat? No. But he is a player that you can trust to get the job done on a consistent basis where you feel comfortable having him as your cornerback number 1 or number 2 out there. And he brings that. But when you're talking about him with this defense as a whole, with a TJ Watt, who's paired also with the Alex Highsmith, who's really stepped it up this year, with Myles Jack and the way that he's been playing, and ultimately how his play has elevated the play of Devin Bush and Robert Spillane to the point where the inside linebackers are probably the most consistent position group that we have on defense right now.
Yeah,
it's just been beautiful watching all of these guys that have had to step up, or the guys that we have had higher expectations for that have actually been living up to those things. But yeah, when you talk about this defense and why we should feel more optimistic about them and why we should feel that we can get out of some of these stadiums now, it's real, it's legitimate. This defense is designed to create turnovers. This defense is designed to not allow a ton of points. And even in the absence of some of these players, they still have been giving up what? Around 20 points? 17 points? 23 points? Like, that's still high-level defense without your best player. So now when you're getting these players coming back, absolutely, the expectation still should be high because this team is capable of that. And now that they're going to have the pieces in place to do it, now you just got to go out there and execute it.
It's all about execution. We'll see if they pull that off this weekend. Moats, thanks so much for joining me, man. It's always fun to have you.
All love, baby. You know that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun talking with you on Steeler Nation Radio with our man Wes Euler. It's fun having you here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people know the other places they can find you, get your insights into the game.
Yeah, no doubt, man. A lot of my media content is on YouTube. Just type in my name, Arthur Moats, or go to the website, arthurmoats.com.
Absolutely. Do check out Arthur Moats. He knows his stuff. That's why we love talking football with him here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Thanks again, Moats, for joining the show. Thank you for listening to the show or watching the show. If you saw us on YouTube, you can find the show Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. Like the show. If you like this episode, if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the YouTube channel to get all of the Locked On Steelers Monday through Friday episodes. Your team every day right here. Again, I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read me at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'll be back tomorrow with Crossover Thursday. We've got Ross Jackson, the man himself, from Locked On Saints. It's going to be a legendary episode because if y'all don't know Ross, that man is for real, just like Moats. We'll be talking all things there on the Crossover episode. We'll see you there.